Hello, this is Mrs. Russo, and I'm going to talk to you about Chapter 4, Lesson 3, Interpret the Remainder. Today we focused on reading word problems and figuring out what exactly the question wants us to find. The first strategy that we use is called using the remainder. So what they're going to do is they're going to read through the word problem. Ed carves 22 small wooden animals to sell at the craft fair. He displays them in rows with 4 animals in a row. How many animals will not be in equal rows? So the kids today saw this, and they automatically, let me switch colors to something that's a little bolder. 4 was the divisor, 22 is the remainder, and they go through, and they can use their long division. And they were very quick to solve that this was 5 remainder 2, which is awesome and shows growth. However, they need to reread the question, how many animals will not be in equal rows? They need to figure out what part of their answer or their work will answer the question. And so that's the tricky part over the next few days, is for them to actually think about the word problem and think about what the question is asking them to find. In this case, which one will not be in equal rows? Well, that wants the remainder. So 2 animals is our answer there. Now, what I showed them earlier today was I crossed off this, and I asked a question like, how many full rows of 4 animals will there be? Well, the answer would then be 5. So even though their math can be the same, their answers will be different depending on what the question is. For example, this one is called the use the quotient. Ben is a tour guide at a zoo. He can take no more than 7 people on a tour at one time. If 80 people want to see the zoo, how many groups of 7 will Ben show around the zoo? Well, they immediately know I need to do 80 divided by 7. And they're going through and solving this great, which is awesome. So they automatically know 11 remainder 3. However, how many groups of 7 will Ben show around the zoo? Do I want how many are left over? Do I want how many groups of 7? Or do I want, there's another strategy we're going to go over too. In this case, we're going to use the quotient, 11 groups of 7. Because I want to know how many groups of 7, which is the full amount. Well, you don't consider the remainder. The remainder is not going to be a factor in that answer. The next one is quotient plus 1. Mrs. Russo wants to take your class to McDonald's. She can only fit 4 students in her car. She has 22 students in her class. How many trips will Mrs. Russo need? Well, immediately they're whizzing through this division because we're going all the way back to 4.3 now. And they say 5 remainder 2. Well, how many trips will I want to take? Well, if I only take 5 trips, I'm going to have 2 students that are left over that I'm not going to take. How many trips do I need to take everyone? Well, we're going to take our quotient and add 1 to it. I had many students that wanted to add the remainder, and I said, well, what's that represent? We talked about how it represents the number of students left over. Well, am I going to take 1 trip for each of them? No, I'm just going to take 1 trip of 2 students instead of 4. So our answer here would be the quotient 5 plus 1, so it would be 6 trips. So the math itself is easy for where they're at. It's going to be interpreting that question. And last one, which I think is the most tricky strategy, is remainder as a fraction. Magna has some leftover wallpaper that is 73 inches long. She wants to cut them in 8 pieces to use around the photos in her scrapbook. Each piece will have an equal length. How long will each piece be? So they're going to go through and do their division, and they find out it's 9 remainder 1. Well, in order to do this as a fraction, I like to call it clockwise circle. So it's going to be 9. The numerator of the fraction is going to be remainder 1/8 inches. So each piece is going to be 9 1/8 inches. This is usually talked about if they've one long piece like a long board or a long piece of rope and they cut it into equal sized pieces. That's usually when you're going to use the remainder as a fraction. We're going to be working on this the next few days. Please reiterate to them how long each piece will be. I do have hints on tonight's homework, but in the future they're going to be on their own to interpret that question, and that's something we're continuing to struggle at. So, thank you. Have a good night.